Welcome back. We're going to pick up here where we left off with multi-view orthographic projection drawings and add another layer to it by looking at section. Section is a way of looking inside of an object to talk about usually vertical relationships, or if it's the horizontal, plane relationships. So if I have my object here, what we're going to want to do is cut a horizontal plane through it, kind of remove that top so we can look down inside and redraw that here. Similarly, we're going to cut a vertical plane through it, remove that front and look inside, and we'll draw that kind of on top of our other stuff for reference. These can be placed anywhere. When you're working on your larger sheet, we'll be able to manipulate where they go around the scene. We can also place it over here or here by using our projection methods. But let's start by making a horizontal cut through this object to look at section projection. Now where that cut could be, we can locate a horizontal cut here in the front view. We can also locate it in the right view, or even here in our secondary projection, auxiliary front right view. I'm going to use the front view because it's pretty straightforward and we can just work our way straight up. I'm working on trace paper, which I would suggest it's a good place to start when you're first getting used to this, so you can plan out your drawing and kind of understand all the steps, and then you can commit it to your Bristol once that's kind of finished and you understand how it'll go. So where do we choose to put this? It could be anywhere. If this was a building and let's say it's 10 feet tall, we'd put it somewhere around here for a typical floor plan at 4 feet high above the floor. That doesn't matter here because we're just drawing a 2-inch block, so we can be a little bit more flexible. What I want to do is cut it somewhere inside of this triangular cut so I can reveal that right here in this drawing is not a perfect square all the way around, but has a little gap cut off of it. And you might say, yes, we kind of get that because we can see it, but with your other cubes and with them together as 3 objects as one, it might get a little bit more complex. And there's a lot of relationships we want to understand across this horizontal plane about how geometry lines up. So you could measure, I can measure down 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 or something and kind of pick it, or you could look for an interesting area and just kind of go with it. I'm going to say pick somewhere, let's say around here. Just draw a horizontal line. Give that a little bit of weight so you can see it on the camera. Now that line is our cutting plane. It exists as a plane, and we're just looking at the edge of it here in the front view. But in the top view, that plane, right, could be something like this, just sitting there intersecting our object. One of the things we want to do with section that's really important, one of the first things you should do as soon as you draw that line, right there indicating where you want to cut the section, then you want to show which direction you'll be looking. Now this cut, I'm going to look down. So from the top we're looking down, which means I want to draw some little tick marks down. And you can measure these. I'm going to get it pretty close and just come back through with my tools and cap them off. And you can start to see, now we've got a cutting plane line. Let's make it good and heavy. As well as these 2 hatch marks. And these are kind of like arrows. They point down. That means I know that when I cut this, I'm going to look down. And that's not always obvious, especially when I go to a vertical section. Why don't we just draw one in before I even start projecting? Let's do one that does something similar, but in this vertical direction. Typically, you draw this in the top view, so we'll do that here. Just project a light line all the way through, and then come in here and give that some weight. Now I know where I'm cutting, but it's much more ambiguous about which direction I might look, left or right, than it is when we're thinking about up or down, right? Only if we wanted to look up at the ceiling would we cut a section and look up. So typically in a plan, if you drew this, it's going to look down. But in a vertical section, which you just refer to as section from now on, we have to pick which direction on that line we're looking. In this case, how about we look to the right so we can use this space in our drawing to draw the section. So the same type of thing, I'll come through and make those tick marks and then connect them in the vertical And I'm filling them in so you can see them. You don't have to. You do this, you need to make sure it's nice and clean and solid. But they're so small, you can probably kind of do it like that. And I have a little overdraw. We'll erase that later. So this is a horizontal or plan cut. We're looking at things in the XY. And this is a vertical or section cut. Both operate very similarly, but they show us different things in architecture. This one's about moving around and relationships through space, movement, circulation. This one will be about moving vertically, stairs, things like that, as well as the relationship between floor, space, and ceiling, roof and sky, ground. So let's start with our plan cut here. Once we've cut this line, everything it intersects, so this point here, these 2 points can be projected either up or down, whichever way you want to go. I'm going to go up and just draw here so it's in our frame of view. Can be projected through the other drawings to start to locate the plan there. And from this information, we know this dimension here. Let's call that X if this is a typical X and Y setup. And we have X and Z here, and we have Y and Z over here. So let's call that X. We know that distance. We know all the distance along this plane in that X direction. We'll just draw a few projection lines coming up. Be very careful to accurately project from that point of intersection. Switch over to my more accurate triangle here. So I had a little bit of wobble there. It looks like my thing got loose, and sometimes you gotta check that. My little thing got loose here, moving it up and down. So I had a little bit of wobble. I want to double check these lines to make sure they're accurate to where I want to place them. I'm just gonna redraw on that one because it looks pretty good, and come back and reproject my other vertical line. There we go, and you can see now I have a lot of wiggle in there. I'll fix it up as I draw over it, but I have to know that that one is not good. So just be careful with the tools. If these get loose, it can get a little wobbly. So these should get a bit tighter. There we go. Seems fine now. So once I've done that, I can choose a place to start drawing my plan up there. That again, use the same distances near the rest of your drawing that you're measuring between things if you want, or maybe you want to go a little closer so you don't run out of room. I'm going to try not to overlap them. I'm just going to start it right there. Now, technically, since we know the X directions through projection, we might also want to know the Y directions through projection. The Y directions would come from here and up. I'm pretty tight in spacing here to do that nicely. So we're going to have to figure out a way to get this to rotate very quickly and come into this object, right? So we find ourselves into a little bit of a tricky place. One thing you might start to do here is decide that you need to move these further out and kind of rebuild the drawing. And that probably will help, having a little bit more gap, because we're so tight we don't have any room to maneuver. You'll start to get the sense of this. We can also bring these dimensions from further back more quickly from the same plane line as this. So why don't I go ahead and try it that way. If I extend this over, just like we projected to get information between these two views, and then along its bisector here where it intersects, we can reflect. We can use the arc here as well if we want, but since this is a simple 45, it's pretty easy to go like this. And now we intersect these points here, and technically we could go ahead and also indicate our little tick marks here, bring them over so that they line up in the same place if we want. That this would be the same thing as a plane looking down. I'll leave it light for now because it's not our primary projection. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start arcing straight from this corner. So I'm just doing a projection within the block itself. And we can get out our compass dude if we want, because you're used to looking at those nice arcs. And you can always do this on a piece of trace paper, even a small piece on top of your drawing, so that you can do all these construction lines and then not have them mess up something you've already drawn, that's totally fine. You might then bring a few of them back into your primary drawing for continuity so stuff doesn't float. So I brought all those around, the rest of them right now we don't need, and then I can take them up based on this furthest edge out. So now it's hinging around this. I'm going to rehinge around this point here to get over to this side. So that same information is coming right back in, right? This is the information that was right here on top of this. We're just repositioning. There'll be a lot of repositioning happening. It will be my bisector. Yeah, I don't need all the others if I just use my arcing. So it's going to be kind of clean so that the projection circles are different than your drawing lines. Bring that up. The problem I'm going to run into here is with my compass not being big enough, so I'll have to do a little reflection. Probably down there. And my compass needs to have some adjustments, so easy enough just to bring these up to our bisector and then bring them over from there. And you might be wondering why I'm not using this. I just don't want to travel over this tape a whole lot because it tends to get stuck to the piece. So using the two triangles is a little bit cleaner for me. But so far I haven't had to measure anything. We'll see if we can do that for everything because that would be ideal. Because the more we measure, the more kind of inaccuracies we start to introduce relative to everything on the page. The projection keeps everything connected the same way. So there we go. So now I brought this information from this cut over to here, and this cut up and over to here, so that I know my X and my Y dimensions to start to fill in the box. Now, the things that I am missing are the thicknesses of these edges here, which would be up there, because I didn't draw them in as dashed lines. Now, if you've done that, then you can pretty quickly bring those up through projection, but that's something I would either have to measure, or knowing that this is a square, I could connect my two corners very lightly there, and just reflect that line here in this direction, and this line here in this direction. So why don't I do that so I don't have to get out a ruler. So now I have, should be all the parts to kind of start to get this done. I want to bring up my section line in this direction. That's what I was looking for. There we go. So now that really is to fill it in. These 2 points and these 2 points are where this triangle cuts off. And the rest of it is just a ring and a square, so I can come through and darken up my perimeter. Now section is an invasive action, right? That means that it's like cutting into the object. And just like the pepper, we can start to think like, well, that really did leave a mark and reveal this kind of interior material and flesh of the pepper. And so that's something pretty heavy. Like we're going to draw our lines to reflect that. So you're going to use your heaviest line weight for the section cut most of the time. It means you want to be sure you know where it's going so you don't overdo it. But in a sense, that's all I'm really going to have with this cube is this perimeter with the corner cut off. Now, why that's not matching up might be some inaccuracies over here. Actually, it's probably because this side is cut differently than this side to make them match up for the material down at the bottom. So they might actually be a bit different. Those are things you can discover by doing the section. If it was drawn more as a mitered box, so more idealized, then they would match up perfectly. But in this case, I might also want to consider bringing in some of the information about how my box is constructed. And I think I've drawn it all. But perhaps I forgot some parts here, right? I didn't draw this and this cap over here, which now I know where they are. I could bring them back down to my original drawing. You sometimes miss things. There, and do the bottom. But that also means I know that in this section. There's a piece of material there, and I can confirm in the back as well. And knowing that I've kind of cut it at this plane here, I will see these two edges. So I can go ahead and draw those in lighter. And there's probably a little cleanup I need to do in there. And ideally I would come back and I'll give this a little bit more thickness to line weight, especially if I was just going to let it be a drawing with only lines and without tone or hatch. If I do some hatch, then we might be able to do a little less line weight intensity, but it's still a good idea to thicken it up some here on the outside. Again, I like to do all of my verticals and then all of my horizontals. So I'm not switching back and forth too much. That's just more tool management and efficiency to get used to. And there, that's a little bit stronger. It's even starting to make some of this air that happened earlier when my paper was shifted, my tool was shifted, kind of disappear into the background, which is nice, right? So we don't have to actually do a lot of fixing. So that's a plan. Let's go ahead and give myself a little bit here. So we've got our plan cut there. And you're asked to do a couple more, and I'll let you figure those out by cutting them in different areas. And you're going to cut them through all three of your objects. You know, if this is new to you, take it one at a time. Start with the easy one, move on to the harder ones, kind of build up your drawing one piece at a time. You'll work your way through it. So the next thing I want to do is develop this vertical section here, and I can project it just like the elevation right out in this direction, and I can draw it sideways so my ground plane is there and I'm looking that direction, or I can even bring it around and drop it down to be in the same line as this one here. Let's just go with the simple. Bring it out to the side first. You can decide which one you want to do, which one makes sense for the drawing that you're working on. Here we're working with pretty standard orthographic projection, so I think it makes sense to go straight out to the side and keep it simple. So what we're going to do, same type of thing, we bring these points where it intersects, or we're going to draw, and it's going to look very similar. Decide where we want it to end up. Well, let's just build off some of our other lines here. So we're going to end up here, and I'm going to give that some weight to be my ground line, so I remember that that is a pretty strong barrier right there. And then bring over a few more projection lines. And I'm in the same position where I didn't draw all these thicknesses. In this case, I'm looking at the cap, so I don't really have them. So I have to figure out how to bring those around. Another way we can do that is using bisectors again. And kind of a simple one. I can bring the thickness through from here and then intersect my piece at a 45. And then I know where the reflection point is there. Just bring that over. And eventually you can transfer all that information to every view, so you don't have to work abstractly through them anymore. You just know where that is. I can take this all the way through to this view for drawing it in, even though we wouldn't see it there, but we see it down there. So I think that's a good amount of this. And we can consider, again, now I'm looking in this direction, so I definitely know the Y. So I know the Y in my drawing space. So I need to know my Z direction. And this drawing here has my Z, and it seems like it's pretty easy to bring this over and just rotate up. So I'm going to go with that. I've already got even a whole projection system set up over here from other drawing, and you might find that happens quite a bit. There we go. There we go. But in this case, I'll be hinging in a different place. So I'm going to bring out a 45 from that corner. And I'll be hinging around this. I don't have to curve at the base. I can just draw a line straight up and use the bisectors for anything else. I have my top thickness here. The bottom thickness I'll have to figure out because it was never drawn. So we just do that bisector and bring that point over. And you don't need to do these big dots that I'm doing. I'm just doing it so we can all see what we're talking about. And for this particular section, you might need some of this information. And so that's already brought across, and it's right there. And we'll see if we need anything else. Let's start with that. Typically, when drawing the section, you'll start by drawing the stuff that you're cutting. Just like with the pepper, you look at that place where the knife actually touched the skin, and then we can go and add some stuff in the background. With this view up here, there's really nothing in the background except these two little edges of the cut area there. The rest of this would just be a plane in the background, so there's nothing to draw. Part of your assignment will ask you to add a little bit to this and kind of design something in section, and so you might add some more. And I can also bring this point across, because if I cut here, I will be able to see this point, right? These points back here will be visible to me, so I'll bring them over. Let's go ahead and get our section kind of blocked in there. Move the bottom surface. Since I know the bottom's a cap, I can just draw that all the way through. And the top surface is a cap, but I do have to be careful to know that like the top surface stops here, so it will stop right there. And this one I don't want to draw all the way through, so I don't want to disrupt my caps. Bottom side, and then I'll have to decide where that right there is going to stop. So to know where that's taking place, I have this line coming down to this point. I can bring it over in this direction, intersects there. I already have a line going up, but let's draw it again because that's just a coincidence. And so I know that needs to stop right there. So that's my perimeter, right? It looks very similar to this. There's going to be subtle differences of where the material overlaps. Oops. And then we'll have to look at what can we see in the background over here. Right, so this point we should be able to see on the interior, which is also this point here. So that's coming around, coming up, coming over to locate it here on the top and here on this side. So we're going to see that line coming across there, and it's actually coming from, and it should be a 45, but it might not be due to the way the model's made or some other inconsistencies. We can connect our dots. I won't actually see anything out in space there. If that's our top view, and there's nothing here to draw, so all this will get erased. I just see these two planes and a line in the background. And so I've done most of the section there. That should be good. Next we can look at giving a little bit more value to these. But first thing to start is you draw your cut plane in the horizontal or the vertical. The vertical is a section, the horizontal is a plan. You project out from that. So I'm looking in this direction and I'm projecting away from it. I'm looking in this direction, so I project away from it. If you go on this side, everything gets flipped upside down and it gets confusing. And then we can use all of our other views information in some way to get the X, the Y, and the Z dimensions and information transferred to each view. And then you can begin to expand to all of your cubes so you can see them sitting underneath, to the side, or around this other object. We'll do another quick video on hatching to fill in tone, and then we'll see you next time. Good luck.